Good morning. Good morning to this session on transboundary water cooperation. The truth, the fact that you're here is already a lot of commitment. Sunday morning, we were expecting that the hall would not be full, but I do see a considerable amount of people here. And I would also like to welcome our online audiences from all over the world, also those who stand up today, at least in the Central European Times Fair. Congratulations to you for being with our session today. This session is about experiences and reality that we have made in different contexts in the Global South, but also in Switzerland, and we're also going to hear some experience from the Colorado River context. So I'm delighted to have, at the beginning, two keynote speakers. We have Mason Al-Soubi, who will join us online, and we will have Laura Turley, who will stand with me here. Laura, please come forward. We had plans to have someone from UNCDF from Africa. We had a short-term cancellation, so I'm sorry for that, but the two distinguished keynote speakers, they will make up a part of what had been planned for UNCDF in Africa. So with that, I would really like to start the content of this, where we explore and examine the links between diplomacy, technology, and finance in transboundary water cooperation. And I'm delighted to start with a keynote by Mason Al-Soubi. Mason Al-Soubi is currently the project manager of the 7-year One First Green Climate Finance project in Jordan entitled Building Resilience to Cope with Climate Change in Jordan through Improving Water Use Efficiency in Agriculture Sector. She is the chair of the Management Committee of the Blue Peace Middle East Regional Mechanism, initiator and co-founder of Women and Water Diplomacy in the MENA Region Initiative, and a member in the US National Academy of Sciences Committee on Transboundary Water Security. Maysoon, do you hear and understand us? Welcome to this session, and thank you so much that you can be with us. Probably, what time is in, where are you, and what time is it? Maysoon?
Well,
Very welcome.
Hi, how are you? Now I'm in Prague, but I'm of course from Jordan.
Okay, it's also early morning for you, though.
All is well.
We don't have a tone for you. The audio is still missing here. Wait a second. Technician? Audio's up there. Audio? Please continue so that we can hear whether it works or not.
Yeah. Shall I? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Now we got you. Mason, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this chance to share with you Jordan experience and managing its water resources, whether it is at a national level or a regional level. So I would like first to start with the challenges that we face, water challenges basically in Jordan. In Jordan, the single biggest Jordan water problem is scarcity. This means when the existing water supplies are insufficient to meet all urban, agriculture, environmental demands. This is also a company with a very rapidly growing population. So when you are in a situation where you have a big number, the population increases and scarcity of water, then this will cause the market forces to cause a significant reallocation from water resources from environment and agriculture to urban use. The result of this, of course, is intensifying stress on water-based ecosystem and definitely on the world's food production capacity. Also, we have a problem of groundwater overdraft. This is because of the absence of effective management, water management. The water table are drawn to a level where it is no more economical to pump from them. And then we will talk about climate change. You know, the Middle East, where Jordan, it's part of it, is projected to be the hardest hit. by climate change. So climate change induces hazards like extreme temperature increase, decrease in rainfall, increase in evaporation, and flash flood, which is another big problem to Jordan. These hazards have tripled in Jordan since 1986, comparing to double worldwide. So the result of this, this will expose the population of Jordan to lose their livelihood, and their property. And I don't know if you heard about what happened in the Dead Sea 1980, where we lost 20 kids. They were because of this flash flood. Another challenge is it is also that the future water supplies are threatened to be declined because of pollution. Some of the or either from agriculture operation, or because of the treated water, which is not served properly, let's say. This is in Jordan. In order to face these challenges, we are actively pursuing innovative solutions, such as wastewater treatment, and we reuse 90% of the wastewater. For us, it is a source of water in our water budget. We're using it for agriculture to free some water and for urban use, but again, now it's for agriculture. Also, water desalination, whether it is brackish or seawater, effective management. In the effective management, we tried many things, including decentralization of our management, look for a new mechanism of financing. We are the first in the region or in the Middle East that start PSP or PPP project, which is a Samra treatment plant. It was announced and based on private sector participation. So they contribute with their financing and with their management of this project, the DC big project. And it is not only a big project. We have a small project where we can do energy efficiency with the special type of contracts called performance-based contracts. So this will align with the climate change. And again, we care about the network. A lot we are protecting our network supply, reducing non-revenue water. And here, I would like to say and to advise everyone to contact this climate finance mechanism. As you said, I'm now leading the first Green Climate Fund finance project in Jordan. It's about climate change. It's a good method approach. They have approach that they will make sure what they're doing is really go into activity and will help us adapt over climate change. A new type of financing in this project. There is different type of financing. Some of what we are doing, the beneficiaries, they participated in this and financing these activities, including the household when we're building for them rainwater harvesting at a roof tank, and also the countries, the partners, they have to co-finance as well. It's not the only money, it comes from the Green Fund, and co-financing is very important. I will not talk too much about our what we are doing at a national level, but again, as 40% of our water are shared with neighbors, so Jordan is also earmarked upon efforts to foster better relationship with Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Israel, with which it shares common water sources. Because we in Jordan, we do believe that optimize cooperation with countries that we share our water can ensure just water allocation, and also give us the opportunity to learn, to exchange information, to exchange best practices. How we manage, we have two types of shared water. Surface water, it is with Syria Yarmouk River, and with Israel Yarmouk River, and Jordan River, and also there is a groundwater, shared groundwater. It is with Saudi Arabia, DC Saq Basin, and also with Syria Yarmouk Basin and Azraq Basin. So this is how we manage this. This is a while ago. Assured the quantity and allocation regime were stipulated in agreements that we signed with Syria, with Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Since those agreements were put in place, there has been a lot of advance in technology and definitely the availability of water and energy. But again, our experience with this type, it can ensure or show that the management of water can enhance or provide potential to enhance cooperation. So that the need and whatever is the type of agreement that we have, it shows that cooperation is there. No matter what is the situation. So that's why, but we have to think innovatively, and not only sign agreements. So that's why the new thinking of us, it's not only focus on water allocation or negotiation, sharing water. This is my part and this is your part, because what we have is already declining. So we have to think of a new policy that is this policy related to common interest and needs in water resources, right? In the share of water resource in this. I'm glad here, I'm proud to share with you our experience with the Blue Peace Middle East initiative. This is sponsored and financed by the Swiss Development Corporation. We started 2009, we're still growing and becoming bigger and bigger. We passed the Arab Springs, we passed the very hard situation that happens in the Middle East, and that yet is still growing. So this initiative, it is the only regional owned dialogue platform in the region that has made its mission to transform water from a potential source of conflict into a source of cooperation, because in this initiative, we believe that cooperation on water is a key element for sustainable development in the region, for stability and safety and stability. So this is the thing for this initiative. In order to start doing it, made its mission to transform water, like I said, from potential, and how they do it, it's contributing to reach its goal by gathering people from a region, our member countries. Now we are talking, we are 4 Arab countries with Turkey. The 4 Arab countries are Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon with Turkey. But we're open for more countries to join who believe in what we see it is the correct way. And especially it is, and the idea of this initiative, it is like circles of cooperation, because you know the situation in the Middle East, still we have a problem of conflict. We have occupied territory in Palestine. People, we don't have a comprehensive peace. So we cannot have all the people on board. But our initiative, it's flexible, dynamic, that we can always receive people that they shared. And, you know, we're talking about an area where we shared, a lot of countries, they share the aquifers, whether it is a groundwater. This is what we are doing. So this is the first and only regionally owned. Yani regionally owned is very important. Yani we are the people from the region who decide. And we have SDC with us just to help us, to facilitate being with us. But the decision, the everything, it is from the region itself. And this is what it makes this initiative very unique and innovative. So we gather these people from region, from different background. The thing of this is to exchange, to give them the venue to exchange, to foster knowledge exchange, create innovative solution, of course. So we have to think how to improve. It's not, we are talking. And what's most importantly is where we have different stakeholders, different backgrounds, different interests, but definitely we share the same benefits. So we have something to share. We sit together and then we work with time, gain interest, and we're improving. So previously focusing, when we start, focusing on water efficiency as a tool for promotion of cooperation. When we choose a theme that we should work on, it is agreed by all countries. This is really the need, and we find out that most of the water in agriculture, they need a lot of help in efficiency, but that's why previously we focused on water use efficiency as a tool for promotion of cooperation. Blue Peace, now we didn't stop at one end and that's it. So Blue Peace goes today to further by implementing water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus approach. For now, this is our theme, and of course we're thinking of the future. It's not only the things that we are doing to help for the current period. We're thinking for the future of our water. So the initiative is also highly supporting youth. We need our future leaders to be very well skilled. They know about water, they know about how to negotiate, how to defend the natural resources that unfortunately in the Middle East, most of it is depleting. And also this is the youth. They will work with us with time, and then we'll give them incentive to learn more and to show what they know and to compete. And also we don't forget the media. Media is very important to tell the story of your initiative. Public awareness is very important. Whatever you do, how important is what you are doing. If the people, they don't know in the right way, they will not support you. So when we starting from 2009 until now, we have the media with us. We took them to our trip, to our visit, so they will know everything. Of course, in the long term, what we're looking to this initiative, we're wishes to become a source of inspiration and knowledge for decision makers who could use this initiative expertise and translated it into adaptive and more effective policies at a national level and, of course, at a regional level. I will conclude by telling about activities that we are doing for this phase, 2023 to 26. We'll keep on building a trust and dialogue. It is important. It is very bad. Even during the Corona time, we used to meet very frequent on Zoom, online. It is important to keep the dialogue through meetings, and we also do study tours. We need people to know how other countries manage peacefully their water, shared water, how they are creative. We look of different type of structure of those commission and at the same time financing. If you look at in Mauritania, they have a dam. They share the cost, share the benefit. But this is one of the lessons that we should know. In Laos, the rich country, they cross-subsidize the poor country because they want for this commission to be financed by them. So there will be no donor, retriever, or interference. So the rich country, they help the poor country to upgrade. And then it is a challenge. It is not an open source for them to pay. It is just to give them a period of time. They have to reform, they have to improve, then they will be equal. But this is also another thing. But important to keep this dialogue with visit. Now we are visiting also with different type of commission, Europe, Rhine River, Senegal River, even in Nile Basin. So to see the reality is also, and to show people, we used to invite members from the parliament because we need the people to know they represent the people in their country. So we need the people to know about our decision. It should be people decision, not one or I don't know who decision. Again, this year, like I said, it is a Wi-Fi Nexus program. We have a full program where we also exchange and learn, have a pilot project, and it will be the theme of our capacity building program. Like I said, training capacity building programs, it is now for theme of the Wi-Fi.
May I kindly ask you to, sorry for that, 1 minute to close. Thank you very much, Soon. Thank you.
Sorry. So training and capacity building programs with our partner locally. We establish a water diplomacy center at one of the Jordanian universities to make to give lessons, courses to people and public employees, and with our international IHE Delft and Geneva Water Hub as well. Also media, I said it's important, so we will have them all the time with us. And I told you that we established a special program for youth, fellowship program. For this I will end here, and sorry for talking too much.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you, Maysoon. Thank you also for this insight. And you probably only scratched a bit the surface of the complexity in this region, that there are agreements, but they are typically only little respected or not implemented. And then you showed also the variety of approaches and engagement that the Blue Peace Initiative in the Middle East employs to induce change. And the regional ownership is, as you mentioned, is also one thing that stood out of your short presentation. Thank you so much, and please be invited to stay a bit on our panel, on our session. And this is now where I would like to invite Lisa Turley from the Geneva Water Hub. She will talk a bit about an experience in Switzerland. Even in Switzerland, we have transboundary water cooperation. We have a series of agreements in place, and some are negotiated. Lisa Turley is I dare to say this, she's a senior science policy manager of the Geneva Water Hub, a center of water of competence on water and peace. Laura is an expert in transboundary water cooperation. You have worked at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IIST, for over a decade as a policy advisor, and you hold a PhD in environment governance from the University of Geneva. So welcome, Laura. Thanks for sharing a few insights from Switzerland, and as you told me, also a little bit from the Colorado River. Welcome.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks very much. So yes, thank you to the organizers for inviting us to participate today, and thank you to all of you for being here on a Sunday morning, those here in the room and online. The Geneva Water Hub, as you mentioned, is a center of competence on water for peace. We work globally, but today I have the pleasure of talking about something much more close to us geographically, which is Geneva, the greater Geneva region. And Geneva will be a place that many of you already know, many of you are already familiar with, and perhaps it's a place that you've already been to discuss cooperation, to discuss water cooperation. But today I'd like to make the case that Geneva itself is a source of inspiration and even a laboratory for transboundary water governance. Yes, so please, thank you. You can put the whole first slide on. And it's also a place where we have a long history of cooperation in water governance and transboundary governance in particular, and so I think that adds a particular value to the discussion today. So just to give you a little bit of context, what you see here, the yellow perimeter is what we're calling the Greater Geneva region, and the red dotted line on the inside, that's the international border between France and Switzerland. So there you can see right away the number of water resources that are being shared. Well, you can see some of them anyway. We have on the one hand an international lake, Lac Léman, and Geneva is just located there in that bottom western corner. We have the international river, the Rhone, which comes down from the Alps into the other end of the lake, then out of this part of the lake, on towards Lyon and down towards the Mediterranean in France. Then we have many, many small tributaries and streams, as well as shared aquifers. So all of this is happening in this small region. On the governance side, also a lot of complexity. On the Swiss side, at least 3 different levels operating in water governance. On the French side, as many as 6 if you go from the European Union and the Framework Directive all the way down to municipalities, not to mention also river basin management structures. So it's a complex space, and so it's a metropolitan area of about 1 million people, and here we're talking at about 2,000 kilometers squared space, so it's really a lot happening. But nonetheless, in this small space, we have an international agreement over the lake, Lac Léman, about managing pollution. We have an old transboundary aquifer agreement, one of the oldest in the world to our knowledge. And this is also still happening in the absence of a river basin agreement or organization for the Rhone, but that's something that might be coming online in the future. I think we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here, this is some research that was done by the Geneva Water Hub with the Canton of Geneva. And so what we found in this piece of research, or my colleagues found, was an abundance of tools operating at the transboundary level. So I know you can't see this in detail, but I'll explain a little bit. So these are over time, which is the bottom axis, you see an evolution of the number of tools to manage water in a transboundary space. So there are different types of tools here. By tools, we mean kind of any technique used by governments to implement their water policies or to collaborate and problem solve. And so we have different types of tools here. Some of these are more about monitoring and observation. Some of them are about joint investment. Some of them are strategic planning tools. So there's all different types, and they're coming from different sectors. Just briefly, I mean, the blue is fishing and also navigation. Gray, you have some energy. Brown is urban services. Green, environment. Red is the security piece, so really flooding. So you see this evolution of tools in this transboundary space. Some of them are permanent, as you'll see, spanning over time, and some of them have quite a short lifetime because they have to deal with a specific objective, and then their lifespan is over. So of course, over time, you see how the number of uses is increasing. I think that's definitely worth noting. And then towards the late the late 90s, early 2000s, you have an even deeper regional integration by coming together as an agglomeration, a kind of metropolitan agglomeration on a number of areas, including environment, including water management. So there you just see an exponential increase in the number of tools to share water. Next slide. So I'll just give a couple of examples because we are still short for time. So I'll just give an example, first of all, of a tool that was designed for the transboundary space. And this is an example of an early convention. It's the Franco-Swiss Convention on the Protection of Lake Geneva. It was developed and signed in 1962. It might have been signed in 1963, in fact. And one of the early missions of this convention was to tackle phosphorus pollution in this shared lake. Which would become really dramatic in the lake. No one would go near the water of Lake Geneva, if you can imagine now. So they were very successful, as you can see in this chart, in reducing phosphorus in the lake, in Lac Léman. They also they established an international commission for the protection of Lake Geneva, CIPEL, which is still alive and well today. They have a permanent secretariat in the Canton of Vaud. They have representatives from both countries on a decision-making body, technical committees. They have a monitoring function, and they monitor as much as 8,000 kilometers squared of the entire catchment of Lac Léman. So this even goes beyond the Grand Genève region. And yes, so it's been historically successful, and now they're turning their attention as well towards micropollution, which we know is an upcoming issue. Okay, next slide. Another example is of a different sort. It's a tool that was adapted from one of the countries to the transboundary context. So this is an example of river contracts, which were a tool used on the French side to manage smaller rivers, so sub-basins. And it was adapted into the cantonal legislative framework in Switzerland and used in this transboundary setting. So it's something that enables local stakeholders to respond to specific needs, so maybe punctual needs related to joint investment or to addressing a quality issue, typically. And they have developed a rivers committee to manage these contracts. They're short lifespan. They often last for about 7 to 9 years only, once their objectives have been met. So since 1995, when the first one was used in this transboundary space, there have been 6 different river contracts. And just to mention, in one example that I think gives you an insight, is this example of the Chuy wastewater tunnel. So this is one of these sub-basins, the Alandon basin. Was one of the tributaries was experiencing a high level of pollution. And this was because 2 of the wastewater treatment plants on the French side had become obsolete. And so instead of building new treatment plants to replace them, they built this rivers committee built a wastewater tunnel that brought wastewater from these 2 sites to a shared plant on the Swiss side. And then instead of taking this effluent and putting it into the tributary, they took it to the Rhone River, where it would be more diluted. And so the effect was greatly improved water quality in this tributary. Something that's worth noting is this tunnel was built entirely in Switzerland, but financed almost entirely by the French partners. And there are other examples like that too that go in the opposite direction, where in this region we have the Swiss authorities financing flood protection or river restoration on the French side of the border because it's a shared transboundary space. Okay, next slide, please. So, yeah, there are, of course, many other examples, but I'll go to some kind of overall messages on the enablers of innovation. Certainly in this area, we see a lot of flexibility and pragmatism of the actors. There's a real community of practice operating in water governance in this region. They know each other, they meet regularly, and there's a lot of this trust, which is something that Maysoon mentioned as well, and just how important that sort of local ownership and trust is. But at the same time, at the end of the day, they become formalized into tools, into agreements that we monitored and recorded here in the study. So there's still this element of formalization, which we think is also essential to give the legal, financial underpinning to investments, for example. There's certainly a need for leaving space for crafting at the local level between actors. So, many of these actors need to uphold, respect central federal laws on water, of course. And the way they do that, they have they're using a lot of innovation to implement them in a way that makes sense locally. Another point is political willingness, but I want to mention a very specific type of political willingness. It's that willingness of both sides to see the transboundary space in a very functional way. It's this kind of getting beyond this idea of, okay, well, my national sovereignty ends here. It's in this region, we really see an example of why they're not kind of foregoing any national interests or foregoing any national security. Indeed, they're seeing the security and the shared dependence of the region on managing water together. And then the importance of civil society, I think here is also worth mentioning. There's many active groups around Lac Léman, and then not to mention the involvement of the universities in Switzerland. University of Geneva, where I'm based, is regularly engaging with cantonal, communal, transboundary authorities, transboundary actors as well, to propose ideas. Now, I'm not sure how I'm doing for time because I could develop a bit more.
You still can spend a few minutes,
okay.
2-3 minutes, and not more than that.
Okay, because I was told
one insight on the Colorado River, as you told me, if that is okay.
Yes, I could say more on that. Okay.
We take that time because it's very interesting.
Okay. So then maybe just to say then, on the Colorado River, or in the Colorado region, is another place where I'm quite familiar with from my own research, and we also see a lot of governance and innovation in that context, and they're dealing much more with issues of scarcity rather than in Greater Geneva, which tends to be more quality issues, but not only. And what I studied was really looking at operations between reservoir operators, and how much there is, a real need to transfer water strategically between buckets, is how they explained it to me. So there's a lot of partnerships that pop up. So for example, to implement the Endangered Species Act or to respect environmental flows, operators are coming up with agreements where, for example, an upstream and far downstream partnership will develop to share water, so that in order to transfer water between the two of them, there'll be a lot of flow in the river, and therefore respect minimum environmental flows, for example. So maybe store more water downstream than upstream. Lots of examples of where during times of relative abundance, water will be sent to both farming and municipal uses, but agreements that in the case of drought or scarcity, that the farmers will not be farming that year. So really thinking, strategically about sharing water storage tended to be one of the main findings in that case. And then, yes, I just have a conclusion slide. Oops, so indeed, the transboundary water context, we would argue, demands governance innovation. And even I think when there are even more comprehensive framework agreements, such as river basin commissions, we would still argue that at an operational level, there still is going to be a lot of innovation that has to be put in place at a in a local space to implement transboundary water governance. So governance and financing happens on a pragmatic, demand-driven basis in this case, and it shows that it can work. And I think there's a lot of lessons from the Greater Geneva region from how once you have very robust risk sharing between the two parties, between the two sides, that's what makes bankable projects. There's a lot of talk about innovative financing, but at the end of the day, if you want to attract financing and if you want to have robust deals, everyone wants to see that there's a lot of reflection into what happens in different circumstances and what kind of risks can be mitigated and who's responsible for what. And I think there's a lot of examples of that from this small space. There is a move towards more integration of water with other areas like transport and urban development in Geneva, which I think is also a welcome evolution as Geneva becomes an agglomeration. And so in conclusion, I would like to make the case that the Greater Geneva region is a laboratory for innovative transboundary water governance. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Laura, and also Maysoon. Thank you very much for this already rich insights from the Middle East, but also from the Geneva region, which is, of course, a completely different context, but yet very important. Now, we have now foreseen a panel for discussion on the same issue, innovation in transboundary water management, employing diplomacy, finance, technology. And I would like to invite, and I'm delighted to have 4 distinguished panelists. I would like to invite Susan Schmeier. Now I have to see. Susan Schmeier is an associate professor of law, water and law and diplomacy, and head of the water governance department at IHE Delft. She is an expert on that. Prior to joining to IHE Delft, she was working for GIZ, the World Bank, and the Mekong River Commission. Welcome, Susan. Then we have Sonja Köppel. I'm sure most of you are familiar with UNEC, and I would say if there are 2 Mrs. Transboundary Water Cooperation on this planet, it's Sonja Köppel with her colleague Francesca Bernardini. So welcome, Sonja. You are also an expert on transboundary water management or cooperation at the UNEC, and you are the one institution that promotes the Water Convention. So welcome also on this panel. Thank you for coming. Then we have Annika Kramer, the head of water program at Adelphi. Adelphi is a large independent think tank for climate, environment, and development, including also water. Thanks, Annika, for joining us today, also for your insights you're going to share with us. Last but not least, we have Jose Castro, who is joining us or coming to be here on this panel from Central America, from Guatemala. He had co-founded the Central American chapter of the World Youth Parliament for Water, and he's the current president, and he's also co-founder and CEO of Advanced Water Testing, an Oxford-based startup on a mission to enable global water safety by developing quick and accurate and affordable field quality monitoring tools. So he's, if I do see, and I say this right, you're also a bit a techie, so good to have also technology side on the panel. Thanks for coming, and thanks for being with us and sharing your insights on this place. I would like to start with you, Sonja. Sonja, you are really working extensively on transboundary water cooperation with the convention. I would like to start by asking you, and I do assume that most of you know what the Water Convention is, so we don't need to start from scratch here on that. But I would like to ask you, Sonja, how can the UN Water Convention help mitigate challenges mentioned by the speakers, and how does the convention enable innovation? We saw innovation at the governance level, institutional level, is so crucial to be adaptive, to find adaptive solution. What offers the convention on that side?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation and kind introduction. So I would like to start by recalling definition of innovation. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it's introduction of new things, new ideas, or new ways of doing work. Another definition focuses more on the exchange. It says it's not only the use of new ideas or products or methods, but also to apply them where they have not been used before. And I would say that innovation is very much needed in transboundary water cooperation, considering that, as we all know, at the global level, transboundary water cooperation is insufficient. If we look at the at the SDG indicator 6.5.2 on transboundary water cooperation, we see that only 24 countries so far worldwide actually meet the SDG target. And that means we really need big progress. We are currently now carrying out the third reporting cycle, and we will see what the results are, but we can already say that for sure there's still much more need for progress. And on the other hand, innovation is difficult. We have seen a positive example right now, but we also know of many basins around the world where transboundary cooperation is already either non-existent or only or very complicated, and so it's not always easy to introduce innovation because governments insist on their sovereignty, etc., etc. And here, I would say the Water Convention plays an important role. As most of you probably know, the Water Convention is a unique now global legal and intergovernmental framework and platform for transboundary cooperation. And it was opened up to all United Nations member states in 2016, actually initiated by Switzerland, which I would say was in itself innovative and visionary. And the good news is that many more countries are in the process of joining. Just this year, we had 5 countries joining, for example, Nigeria, Iraq, Namibia, the Gambia, and Panama as first Latin America country. And many more are in the process of joining. So why can the Water Convention support innovation? Firstly, because the platform it provides is actually evolving. And through the intergovernmental platform, the meeting of the parties, the different bodies, etc., which we have, the convention actually evolves to address new challenges. So, for example, in 2012, the countries realized, but we are missing a mechanism which can actually help countries to prevent and address and resolve conflicts. So the countries decided to introduce an implementation committee, which actually is a body composed of lawyers and also technical experts, which countries can use to better implement the convention and to prevent and resolve disputes. So currently, for example, an advisory procedure is ongoing because one country complained about another country constructing hydropower plants, and so the committee is helping the two to find a way out. Also, as I said earlier, the exchange is important to bring innovation from one place to another. And this can happen in the intergovernmental framework of the convention, where we have different meetings, workshops at global and regional level. So for example, in December last year, we had a workshop on source-to-sea management with examples from all over the world. Or now, just in October, we will have one on a conjunctive use of surface and groundwater, etc. Then usually when we look at new topics, we not only organize maybe one event to exchange experience, but also then prepare actually guidance or tools to develop, like for example, methodology, how to address these new topics, etc. For example, in the early 2000s, the topic of ecosystem management came up, and then the recommendations on payment for ecosystem services were developed. Or the nexus came up, and in 2012, a nexus task force was created under the Water Convention. Or in 2018, financing transboundary water cooperation came up as an important topic and challenge. And that's where then also a new work program area was created, actually led by Switzerland and the Netherlands. Now, and climate change, obviously, also that as an area was already brought up under the Water Convention in 2006, when it was not yet so high on the international agenda. And then a task force was created, guidance was developed, but also, and that's maybe my third point, the importance of obviously also promoting action on the ground through pilot projects and through obviously testing out also new approaches. And that's also happening under the convention. So for example, in this field of climate change, as I said, we started in 2006 with the topic, develop a guidance, and then had a number of pilot projects in different basins. For example, on the Dniester River basin between Ukraine and Moldova, where with our support, the countries then developed one of the first transboundary adaptation strategies worldwide. And now there are more existing, but this is, for example, exchange in a global network of basins working on climate change. And also, I think now with the global opening of the convention, the importance of South-South cooperation is also an important issue. For example, now, as I say, we have more and more countries joining from Africa and elsewhere. And we've introduced a twinning program to where the old parties help the new parties implement the water convention. So, for example, Finland is working with Namibia now in this regard, or now Ghana is also supporting Zambia in the accession process, etc. So maybe to conclude, I just wanted to make some conclusions of what is maybe in how far, what other factors are important to enable innovation in transboundary water cooperation based on our experience. And a lot has been said by the previous speakers already, but I would like to add maybe 2 or 3 points. First, also I think the importance of individuals. I mean, the importance of some people have good ideas, and it's important to empower such individuals and to then enable this exchange, enable them to bring them forward, and so that good ideas such as the blue piece financing, which I think is also what is happening currently in the Gambia Basin. I think it's such an innovative idea, which needs to be, and which will be replicated hopefully elsewhere. And then finally, also another point is the importance of multi-stakeholder networks, bringing together governments, but also academia networks, civil society, youth, and others. And here, for example, such a network is, I would say, IWLearn. IWLearn is a useful network, but also the Transboundary Water Cooperation Coalition, which has been created last year, and which brings also together such different actors. Yeah, let me stop here.
Thank you, Sonia. That was already a rich overview, and thanks for all these infos on the convention. The convention is really a framework to work on that for 2 countries, but we all know that a general framework is necessary, but it's not sufficient to really become effective and to produce results. As we saw at the example of the Geneva water lake and the phosphorus content, for example. There are many other things. Sonia, Susan, you have been working on treaties, on bassin-level treaties, and also institutions for a very long time. Exactly those institutions, a treaty that can make or will lead then to effective cooperation. What is the importance? What is the significance of such treaties, bassin-level treaties and institutions?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I'll continue exactly where Sonia stopped, taking it down to the basin level, where I think we've actually seen a lot of innovation over the last decades, countries really moving in a lot, not all, but a lot of basins from conflict, or just the absence of conflict, but also the absence of cooperation, into actually negotiating treaties, establishing basin organizations that then themselves become creators of innovation. And why is that necessary? And I think why do we need to address this today is because, yes, we have so far not seen a lot of conflict, especially hardly any violent conflict around the basins in the world. Yes, we always think of Nile, Central Asia, Afghanistan, Iran, where we do see conflict, but if we look at the majority of basins, these 313 is the latest count, basins around the world, there is much more cooperation than conflict. However, what we see in data that Oregon State University, IIT Delft, and Tufts are compiling in the context of the Transboundary Freshwater Diplomacy Database is that there is an increase in conflict since the 2000s. It's still relatively little compared to cooperation, but we do see an increase in conflict in both intensity and in frequency. What we also see is that nearly all of this conflict is actually related to infrastructure development. So one country developing typically a dam, can also be other piece of infrastructure. and then the other countries opposing that, not being happy with it, and then conflict coming in if there is either no institution, so no treaty or no basin organization, or if that institution that's available is not able, doesn't have the capacity to address this change. So this is really why I think we have to think again, we have to really rethink and innovate the basin treaties and organizations that we have. And we do have a lot. I mean, we have more than 600 treaties around the world that deal with water resources that are shared between countries. We have also, latest count, 127 basin organizations that have brought about new innovative tools to address, to prevent such conflicts, be it transboundary environmental impact assessments, notification processes, and so on. But there's also still a lot of basins, interestingly, especially basins that are facing challenges such as climate change, rapid infrastructure development, that do not have treaties in place and do not have basin organizations in place, or have treaties that have been negotiated at some point in time but are not really functional. If you look at the latest conflicts that we've seen, you might remember in May when there was even violent exchanges between Afghanistan and Iran over the Helmand River, where there is a treaty in place from the 70s that's clearly not functioning, and both countries are blaming each other of not complying with the treaty. So I think really here the argument to have treaties and to innovate them, because many of them, as I said, don't function or won't be able to function in the future given the challenge we're facing. So really to deal with these treaties and to improve these basin organizations. And that was one more point that I wanted to make that I just forgot, so I'll hand it over to you again, Simon.
Thank you, Suzanne, for this insight on the treaties and the importance at the basin level, which is different from the convention, who is at the national level. We're in the midst of already a huge complexity, and I dare to add another layer. You said about individuals who move the agenda forward. We need to empower them. We need people who are thinking out of the box and go a step further. But for all that, we also need financing. And that's another, I dare to say, a high challenge we all face working in transboundary water cooperation. Annika Delphi is working on that also for quite a long time. And you, with your experience, what are the challenges in financing transboundary water cooperation projects and in general in relation to the various instruments and tools that we have already touched on? Annika, what would you say on financing transboundary water cooperation?
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for having me, and thanks also for the question. I think that's a very important point, which also takes us to the question of how we can take this cooperation and treaties a step further, take it to real implementation of joint projects, joint investment projects, given the fact that most of the conflicts also arose when there were dams and large investment projects. So I think it's an important question. And the fact that these large investments often come with risks, of course, means that it brings in transboundary projects bring additional risks for investors, because even if there's an agreement, the legal responsibility and the mandate for implementation of those projects are spread across various countries and the various national ministries. So that makes it risky for investors, and that's, of course, then a challenge for getting funding for these projects. Also, because if you have a real investment, there's also the question on who bears the costs and who benefits from it. So this, again, comes along with often hard negotiations between the various riparian countries. So that's why many of the funders usually prefer to invest in more programmatic activities, such as basin planning or institutional support and preparatory programmatic studies for investments. But then when you really get to the point of getting funding, that's where it's challenging. That's all. And another point is that most of the existing funding sources are usually structured for single country financing. So the options for RBOs, river basin organizations, and basin projects are more limited as compared to those of individual states. So, and if then these loans are provided to national countries, of course, they need to be well coordinated. That's where river basin organizations can take an important role, but it's also one of the challenges in financing transboundary projects. Another important thing is that we have learned from also what Sonia said, and that many of the promising approaches in transboundary basins to overcome conflicts, to get away from the zero-sum game of sharing the water, requires to take a cross-sectoral approach to increase the basket of benefit sets. I mean, that's the term that has long been used to include energy and agriculture into those projects. And here again, most of the funding, though, is sectoral. And that's also because in the funding organizations, there's sometimes a lack of cross-sectoral expertise, and therefore it's difficult for them to assess the risks that come along with cross-sectoral projects. So, accessing funding for transboundary cooperation as transboundary cooperation in general is complicated. It needs coordination with the various national sectoral ministries, needs to be aligned with sectoral strategies in the countries. And often these processes take very long time, as does establishment of treaties, but also even developing a shorter project. And this means that it can also interfere with changing national priorities that change with election periods, again, which then is a risk for funding agencies to make sure that those projects will also be successful in implementation in the future. Maybe I'll leave it there for the challenges.
May I add, for that particular part, a follow-up question before I go to Jose? Do you see a potential in the emerging climate financing mechanisms, particularly for transboundary water cooperation, or is that a fata morgana?
I think there's climate financing has large opportunities for transboundary cooperation. There's also already quite a few agencies that provide climate financing for transboundary basins, such as the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, or the German International Climate Initiative. And the good thing about climate financing is that it's cross-sectoral by nature, right? So that's those funds. And in general, we can say that more and more international funding agencies take a cross-sectoral approach. But of course, climate financing and accessing these funds also comes along again with challenges. Some are the same as the one I just mentioned. Also most of the climate financing, not the ones that I just mentioned, but in general is focusing on national level. So that's one. And then some of these funds have highly complicated accreditation processes and requirements. So that's why it's difficult for river basin organizations who are sometimes also not eligible, as if they are not a legal entity, for them to access this funding. But of course, there's then also ways to address this. I don't know if you want to come to this now. Or
we might come in the discussion, but later on that. Thank you very much, Annika. Jose, as I said, you're a bit a techie here. We have talked about governance or also institutional innovation, adaptive and flexible approaches. Technology. Technology is equally important. On your side, what is the role of technological innovation for transboundary water cooperation and governance? You have provided new solutions. Please elaborate a bit on that theme that is very important also as a puzzle piece on the road to success in transboundary water cooperation.
Great. Thanks, Simon, for the introduction and invitation. I guess, first of all, I wanted to say that Guatemala is not in Central Asia, just for for everyone that might be confused about that.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, close enough. But yeah, I do kind of push back a little on the seeing myself as a tech person, especially because, you know, water issues are not tech issues. You know, maybe that's, I'm preaching to the choir on that one here. I'm not as insightful for this audience on that. So my role as innovator really on this space is to understand, as you were saying, you know, this is a puzzle and, you know, what are the pieces? And so I need to understand what are the upstream and like downstream innovations that are needed as well. So on the governance side and on the policy side and, you know, finance, of course, that's, you know, the first question, like how are we gonna fund all of this? And all of, you know, these different actors have different incentives, and there are key ways in which, you know, all the pieces of the puzzle are aligned, but there are also key ways in which they are not always so easy to put together. So yeah, in that way, I think our approaches on, like, you know, very systems thinking type understanding of the problems is really important. So being a technology push won't solve the issues. And even if we did have the solutions that we're trying to bring to the market already in place, which is, you know, on the water quality data sort of things, you know, heavy metals, E. coli, phosphorus, all these things, having the data itself, like even having the perfect tool, doesn't really translate immediately to solutions. That's, you know, more on the downstream side of the solution. So yeah, I think the role of, you know, there's definitely a place for making things cheaper and faster and better. But it has to be integral consideration on the other things. And as Sonia was saying, I think innovation is a little bit hard in this space. Part of it being on, you know, just how many moving parts there are and how slow and conservative the industry tends to be. So of course, me from a technology perspective, need to be very aware of that and take it into consideration in like, you know, our business models and how do we interact with like other parties.
Jose, I dare to add a follow-up question. So you're not only, okay, I was probably misled in calling you a techie, but anyhow, I do not consider you a techie, but a much more, a broader person. You're also a representative of a youth organization, the World Youth Parliament for Water. And we have heard from Maysoon and from others mentioning youth as agents of change, if you want to. You as a younger person, probably dealing with spheres of individuals, of officials that are 20 plus or 30 plus years older than you. How do you see your role in that world of these older folks like me, for example, or for any other? Does youth has a chance to make things change?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very, very good question. And I think there's absolutely a role for us. But I would say, you know, I was invited to this session. But I think the strategy that we're taking with the Parliament and the other youth initiatives is not that passive. Like, it's not, we're just going to be waiting to be like tokenistically invited to the conversations. We are, you know, knocking on the doors and, you know, we're really pushing to be there and to be actively considered. So I think that, you know, maybe the passing of the torch is not as, you know, we'll be waiting for you to handle it to us. This is like, we're kind of, you know, trying to really take the driver's seat on some of these issues. Especially, you know, in places like my region, that, you know, there have been, you know, very historical, you know, this is the same people always in politics and like on all the, you know, higher offices. If you follow the news, there's some new elections, and, you know, if you see what the proposition of the people are hopefully going to win today, actually, these are young people, you know, 20, 30-something years old that have never been in politics before, and that have, you know, their own backgrounds, and they're, you know, really putting themselves at the front of the conversation. So yeah, it's a bit of a push rather than you know, waiting around to be invited.
Keep on pushing, I would say here. Thank you very much. You see, it's a super huge, complex issue, water transboundary, water cooperation, and I typically would say to people, constituencies or parliaments, if we want to have quick fixes, we should rather not start doing transboundary cooperation. Sonia, I'm back to you. UNEC, beyond just promoting pure the convention, UNEC is also providing guidance to these highly complex issues. What guidance on these complex issues of financing, cooperation, but in general, does UNEC also provide on monitoring data? You have a wealth of guidance and orientation on that. Tell us a bit about what UNEC and alongside the Water Convention can offer to the wider community on transboundary water cooperation.
Thank you. Actually, the area of data monitoring and information exchange is not only some of the core obligations of the Water Convention, but also was one of the very first areas of work already back in the 90s of the Water Convention. And a lot of guidance material has been prepared at that time, such as guidelines on monitoring and assessment of transboundary rivers, lakes, groundwaters, which was adopted already in 2000. And now we are actually starting to update because these topics come up again with the new parties joining. They say that we need to revive those discussions and also include new technologies such as remote sensing and etc., satellite data. And so, for example, just in early this year, in January this year, we published these updated strategies for monitoring and assessment of transboundary rivers, lakes, and groundwaters, which had been prepared in intergovernmental process of 2 years with experts from around the world. And here I really think that this field can potentially revolutionize transboundary water cooperation, considering now the new technologies which we have. On the other hand, the area of financing, as I said earlier on, has been one of the newest areas. So starting in 2018, we started working on it in partnership with World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, EIB, ADB, DF, IWLearn, under the leadership of Switzerland and Netherlands, starting with a high-level event which we organized on this topic in Astana. And then we actually realized that not so much guidance material exists on the topic of which financing sources are even available. And that's why we then prepared and published in 2021 this study on funding and financing of transboundary water cooperation and basin development. Actually, Susanne was one of the lead authors in this area. And as I say, when we prepare such documents, it also goes along with capacity development. So, for example, we had a global virtual workshop in 2021, and we are going to have another one in December this year, also now in person. And also, we had already some capacity building workshop at regional level, for example, in Senegal, bringing together basin organizations from Africa and Central Asia to also exchange their experiences, and particularly also to look at the role of climate finance in financing transboundary water cooperation.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Once again, back to you, Susan, before maybe a last input, before we would then open up the discussion for the audience to participate in this. IHE Delft was, and you particularly, you as an expert, you were confronted with all this complexity. Where do you see the biggest challenges? Is it finance? Is it diplomacy? Is it technology? Where would you see is the biggest, the chunk of challenge we have to confront?
That's a tough question. I'd say all of it, but in particular the combination of these things. And I think that is a challenge that we're facing because not only are we often not aware of these complexities and these interdependencies, but I think although we've come a long way in terms of integrating the water community, or at least the water resources community, I think what we see here in Stockholm is that the water resource community and the WASH community are still quite divided, but at least in the water resources community we've come a long way. But still, we're focused on specific issues. So there are people who are experts and do great work on, let's say, water conflicts, water diplomacy. Then there are people who've been doing great work like Annika on financing, funding, UNECE's work on that. There's other people who focus very much on the tech side, and there have been amazing innovations in the last years. If we look at the use of Earth observation, AI, and so on, to deal not only with water resources management, but also with more the social and political implications, such as forecasting conflicts, for example. But these are quite separate still. And sometimes I believe, and probably guilty as charged as an academic, we also like to stay in our little silo and focus much more in depth on that specific topic that we're working on. So I think panels like this are great to bring the different perspectives together, but I think we still have to move further in that. And I don't know how to do that. I think the Water Week's a great opportunity, but to come back to your question, for me, that is the real challenge. How do we combine funding and financing for a new technology that can then be taken up by a basin organization, although that organization might not have the legal personality yet to actually get that financing? So how do we combine all that?
Thank you very much. Indeed, very, very challenging. Now, looking at time, it's now a space for contributions, comments, and also questions to the distinguished panelists here, but also to Laura and Maysoon, if Maysoon is still with us. This applies, of course, to all the participants here in this room, but also those joining us online. Please set your questions in, and our technicians will then see whether we can take one or two questions from online, from the audiences online. And it's really now a space for dialogue, and I would ask you to quickly say your name, from where you are, and if you have a comment or a question, remember that we have only 15 minutes left, so it might be good if you could be crispy, short, and concise. Many thanks. So to whom may I give for the first? There over a gentleman. Do we have, and then next one is over there. Oh, there are a lot of hands. Do we have a microphone? Here is a microphone. Please, the gentleman over there would start. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Moez Alawi. I'm from SIWI, West Asia and North Africa office. So my question is that ideally to set collaboration or cooperation between transboundary countries, we need a convention or a treaty. It could be universal or a bilateral treaty, as we have seen in the case of Geneva, France, bilateral convention between France and Switzerland. But in some cases, we are in a situation of conflict between some countries, or we are lacking a political will to have this treaty or convention. Sometimes also we can imagine conflicts between the executive power and the legislative power, so some conventions or agreements could not be ratified. So in that case, my question to our experts, how could we enhance or initiate a collaboration, a fruitful collaboration between countries at the technical level? I mean, how could we innovate in terms of mechanisms, new mechanisms for technicians, for professionals? How could we bring them together from different departments? I can think to water utilities, but people working in environmental agencies or other bodies, even civil society communities. So how could we bring all those people from the different countries together to collaborate at the level of transboundary waters and basins? Thank you.
Thank you, Moise. How to bring technicians together in contexts that might be in a conflict or not in a very close relationship. Who would like to respond or react to that question?
Give it a start,
Susan,
but I'm sure Sonia
please.
wants to add. Well, I think you're actually addressing an important point. This is how a lot of the cooperation that we now see institutionalized in treaties and basin organizations started, because hardly ever is it the Minister of Foreign Affairs that says, oh yeah, let's cooperate, let's sign a treaty with our neighboring states, but it's the technical people that identify the need and push things forward. And if you look at the Nile, I mean, the Nile Basin Initiative for a long time has been something very technical and has actually been functioning pretty well if you look at only the technical level, and has done really good assessments, has really contributed to the understanding of the basin. Or even Afghanistan, Iran, I mentioned that example earlier, where we have seen and still see a lot of tension. There have been, until 21, unfortunately, exchanges at the very technical level between representatives of both countries, and this is really how it starts, and then how for me, the question is then, how do we build that up? Because it's hardly ever the case that we need to convince these water people that cooperation over water matters. It's their non-water people that need to be convinced, and where I think we as the water sector, as the technical people that you mentioned, were not very good at presenting to them what the benefits of cooperation are. Because if we say, hey, then we have a basin management plan, yeah, so what if I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs? But how can we phrase this into tangible benefits for the countries?
Thank you. Is anybody else? Sonia?
I'll be brief. So firstly, I think it can help sometimes to take a regional approach first, and then later on focus on a basin. Then, yeah, as you say, bring it together the scientists, or in Blue Peace we heard also it's at the civil society level or the media, etc. But for this, you often need some kind of a third party to support from outside, which can be a technical financial partner. Then the United Nations obviously does play a role here. And then also thinking about different types of innovative means, like we started in one case, then indeed bringing together the scientists first and doing like a trip along the river, organizing workshops in communities, and then later on the authorities also got interested. So yeah, such ideas.
Thank you very much. Implicitly building trust by these measures also. Thank you so much. We go on. We have a gentleman over there. Go next with next question or comment. Please be short. Tell your name and continue.
Yes, my name is Simon Thuo, Resilience Center in Kenya, work in the Greater Horn of Africa. 3 questions. One is to Annika. Why are we focusing on the 4% of the blue water rather than the 96% of green water, which is much more needed by countries, by nature, for food security and so on? The second question is to the lady from Jordan. Do you see clear danger from innovations in energy, because they are driving water insecurity, because people can withdraw water, especially from groundwater and water scarce areas, in much greater quantities? And the final one is to you and ECE, Sonia and so on. There is a big problem because by focusing on transboundary treaties, you create a situation which is almost like territorial dispute, whereas at local level, you can have neighboring districts, counties, sharing water and agreeing on how this can be utilized. And I've seen this done like on the border between Kenya and Uganda at the local level. But when you take it to the national level, 10 years later, no progress, we are still going round in circles.
Thank you very much. We start with Annika.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your question. And actually, I fully agree. And I think that's also one of the points that I wanted to stress, that it is important to take cross-sectoral approaches. And if we look at the green water, of course, this includes involving the agricultural sector and how the green water is used in the basin. And I see a lot of opportunity there in having, in framing the issues and projects in a less contentious way. If we look at increasing resilience in a basin, that's a topic that countries are probably much more ready to cooperate on than on sharing the scarce blue water resources. If we come to financing, and if we look at financing, of course, climate financing is looking at increasing resilience, and there I think transboundary water cooperation, or what should really leave the realm of water and take a more cross-sectoral approach. And by developing cross-sectoral investment plans and projects, it's also an opportunity to access different sources of funding, as we know that funding in the water sector is not the largest. If we look at the energy sector, for example, there's much more investment going into that sector. So this also opens up opportunities.
Thank you, Annika. The next question goes to Maysoon on the question on energy. Maysoon, you're still with us?
Yes, I am. What is he saying is correct. That's why we choose the theme of WIFI, which is Water, Energy, Food Ecosystem Nexus. And to tell you, in Jordan, one of the things that we were depend on, illegal wells and overpumping with farmers is the cost of diesel. Definitely, if they have a solar or cheap cost of energy, then this will damage the water resources that we have. So we recognize this in the Ministry of Water now. They have a new policy of this nexus. We have to stop think sector-wide. It has to be cross-sectoral, and with this, we establish a high-level council of WIFI. With that, we, as in the water sector, we will make sure that other sectors know, aware of the scarcity of water. It is not only it is energy and food, and it's not only energy per se, because even in Jordan, the water sector is the highest consumer of the energy. So it costs us a lot. So even with that, we know that how energy is expensive, and it increased the water the fuel bill of the country. So that's why we have a program to even increase using this. So by not only focus on water, so water is part of the picture, we have to integrate energy, food, water, and ecosystem. This will help us others know about the situation that we face in water, will decrease competition between sectors, and will make sure our policy as the scarcity of water will be embedded in the energy policy and environmental and food policy. We are aware of this, and yes, this is correct. But we have some policies and action in this regard to decrease overpumping of the aquifers.
Thank you, Maysoon, on that. And we have the last question to Sonia, if I'm right.
Thank you. I would say that the two approaches are complementary. It's important to have cooperation between governments, but also at local level, and they can be mutually supportive in both ways. So, for example, the example which I brought early on Dniester between Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova also involves local community cooperation. And on the other hand, there are examples where cooperation started at government level and where it has gone fast. I mean, the Sava agreement was negotiated between the countries which had been at war in a matter of 1 or 2 years at governmental level. So it is also possible, but it depends on the local situation. And but I do agree that it's important that we also empower and bring forward those local level community or sometimes cantonal level like we heard from Lake Geneva.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, you want to believe?
No,
Please.
Just to add to that point exactly, I wanted to make that point also that, as much as we see these framework agreements as necessary in some places and of growing importance with wicked challenges like climate change, I think when we have instances of transboundary cooperation, these little seeds at the local level, if it's Kenya and Uganda or Switzerland and France, they need to be nourished. We need to understand what's enabling that type of cooperation and try to scale up, facilitate from there as well. So, there are many instances, of course, where there are conflicts in spite of conventions, for example. So it's not a magic wand, but in many cases it can facilitate broader engagement and a foundation.
Thank you very much. I can still take 1 or 2 or max 3 short questions. I would prefer ladies because we had 2 men and it's not a manel here. So fortunately we have sufficient women on here. I have a bit problems to see. There is a lady on the right side here, right here. Yeah, please go ahead. And tell me if there is one question from the online audience. I take 1 question from the audience. After you go first. You go first.
Hello, my name is Meghna. I'm a water professional from India, but I currently reside in Nigeria. So I have 2 questions. When I was doing my master's dissertation, I studied transboundary water governance of River Brahmaputra, which flows between India, Bangladesh, and China. So my first question is to Mr. Jose. So I want to ask, this is from my own experience, because I feel like the youth and young professionals are many times not given the opportunity because transboundary water governance is considered an issue which is highly diplomatic and many times it is politically sensitive. So I want to ask that how you see youth and YPs contribute despite the challenges and despite the resistance which is usually faced given that they are considered not so experienced and young. My second question is because now that I live in Africa, there is a talk going around a lot about decolonization. And when we talk about funding, so the funding usually flows from the first world nations and come to Africa. And I would like to build it up on what the gentleman from Kenya said, that many a times, like traditionally, these transboundary regions have been managed by communities themselves. So how do you see what is the contribution of these first world nations when it comes to funding countries in Africa? Also, what happens when the funding dries up? How do you see the sustainability of such kind of projects? Thank you so much.
Jose, you're gonna go for the two questions.
Yeah,
You're
thanks.
the
Those
one.
are very, very interesting questions. I guess on the first one, I'd say that the work we're doing today, it's definitely going to be paying off, in the next 5-10 years. Because as you were saying, like some of these, treaties or, be it global or local, definitely the people that are involved in those negotiations are political appointments. And of course, a lot of us in the parliament and, related organizations are aiming to have this type of careers. So I'd say the role of youth is in these arenas especially is yet to be unleashed. It'll come in the near future. Again, I'll repeat that we do still have to keep pushing, but I think the work we're doing on building collaboration and meeting the people that we're meeting today and working with in the parliament and our organizations, I think this will be the people that will be doing the negotiations in 5-10 years. So I think starting the work early on those diplomatic ties, I think that's maybe where we stand as youth. And yeah, and I really also like your second question, being from Guatemala myself and getting a lot of cooperation and funding and also from places like the U.S. Maybe not from Spain in the colonial sense, but that's definitely an issue for us. And even today with the political conversations that I was mentioning, there's a lot of foreign interference. So I think we really want to, start from the ground up and try to be more local. Again, just for a matter of what are the incentives of these organizations and what are our own incentives and kind of see where they align and where they're not. So where they are aligned, of course, there's room for cooperation, but where they're not as much, in our own local national interest, maybe that's where we need to be a little more disciplined as countries and as institutions. Of course, the money is always needed, but if it's not actually gonna lead to the solution that we're looking for, maybe it's not really money that we should be receiving in the first place.
Thank you, Jose. Looking at the time, we take one question from the audience and then one from the online audience and one from here, and then we move on to the end of this session. I don't want to withhold you for your next commitments. Rebecca, you have one question from the audience, and then right away I take the other question, and so that we can save time.
Yes,
Rebecca.
thank you. I'm here also with the online audience. I have a few questions, but I will pick one. Hesham Musa from the WMO asks that, to reach agreements between countries sharing a river basin, this requires discussion in 3 areas: legal, institutional, and technical. It's the complexity on how to move and how to coordinate around these 3 areas is huge. And is it better to move parallel or in sequence? What's the best approach here? Very open question.
Thank you. The question on sequence and parallel. We go right away to the lady up there. If I see it right, it's a bit hard to see it from here. Please give your name, short and quick, your question or your comment. Oh, okay. Then we take over there is one question. One from the gentleman over there. That's the final question.
Yes, thank you. This is Angel Adhikari from Oxfam, Nepal. I bring experience of working in Meghna and Brahmaputra basin in between India and Nepal. I just want to share some experience and also maybe bring a question as well. So we have been discussing about conflicts, but what I've learned is there is a myth before it becomes a conflict. And we don't work on those myths between communities, and there are issues that could be dealt by the communities, but we take into the federal affairs, like foreign affairs, and it becomes more complex. For example, when we were working on a Mahakali basin, which is which is a part of a Meghna basin between India and Nepal. We saw, like there was a rumor, like a myth that it's because of India, Nepal is getting flooding. And there is also a part of Nepal that thinks it's because of India there is a flooding. So there is a kind of misconception. When we did a study, we found out, like there is a lot of people kind of, let's say, blaming each other rather than having a conversation. But when we actually brought them all together, we gave them an exposure visits between different places, and they started, like exchanging their WhatsApp number to share the status of the water flow in those areas. And those myths, like which could have been a conflict, we reduced it at the community level. That's one thing. So not all issues need to go to the federal, foreign affairs level. There are many issues that can be dealt at the community level, right? And second thing, in terms of, my question would be in terms of technological innovation. We have been working with the community on this water quality monitoring, but what we are really struggling is on financing after we exit from the area. How do we do it? Who is going to finance it? I see that one of the influencing factor we have noted as political willingness. It's a very complex thing. How do we identify political willingness of, like especially on monitoring the innovations that we do in a basin? So that's a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to react on these two questions, on the question on parallel approaches or sequencized approaches, and then on the two questions of the gentleman from Nepal, from Oxfam, on the myths that are sometimes at play, and also the technology question?
I can say something about just my thoughts on the in parallel versus in sequence, and I think, unfortunately, the in sequence option is not a real option. I don't think, because as I was alluding earlier, these are the technical, the political, the governance, like all these things mutually inform each other. So a sequence approach would probably lead to, okay, we didn't consider that now, so now we need to go back and redo the policy because we didn't talk to the chemists didn't tell us then that was the problem. So yeah, I think this has to be a parallel, like it's a teamwork, and it's an interdisciplinary approach that needs to be taken. And yes, I guess I'll take on the second question as well on the finance. I think that's definitely a challenge. I mean, that's a challenge that we're experiencing right now ourselves in the company that I started. And of course, there are different pools of money, venture capital being one, philanthropy, and all these things. And I think really the key is on incentives, on what can you offer, but also on trade-offs, of course. I think that's where we need to kind of put everything on the table and realize what can we give and what we need to take. And if at the end of the day, if the balance comes out that, yeah, there's a room for innovation, then that's good. But if at the end of the day, what the venture capitalists want is not actually what the market needs, then maybe that's not the avenue. So I think it's a lot of really being clear on what drives every kind of pool of capital and which one actually is aligned with what the problems are.
Can I just
Final remark, Susan, please.
Just want to add and challenge a little bit what you said when it comes to sequencing, and maybe link that with the first part of your question. I think sometimes sequencing just happens by chance or by process. If one, let's say the very political level is not moving forward, but the technical is, and what we see in the Nile, as much as there is to critique about Nile cooperation, we see that in spite of a political stalemate that has been ongoing forever, the technical process has been moving, as I said earlier, and a lot of trust has been built, at least at the technical level. A lot of data, a lot of information has been acquired that definitely makes the basin better off than it would be without. So I think that's also a bit the question: do we also always aim for the perfect solution where the technical, the legal, the institutional, everything goes together, which we might never achieve, or do we go for something that's at least better than the cooperation counterfactual. And that links a little bit to what you said about the foreign ministries. I would argue that in a lot of the places around the world, cooperation is actually happening at a very technical level, and it is only when really when things get really troublesome and when there's national security issues involved that the foreign ministries come in. And very often as a water person, when I see people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, State Department and so on come in, I know now we're in trouble. So in a lot of cases it happens at the very technical level, and we should be happy that it does.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to all the panelists, the keynote speakers. If I dare to wrap up this in 30 seconds, we have prepared something, it's completely obsolete. I try to make a super short wrap-up of this rich discussion. Innovation in institutions, in governance, in financing, in technology is absolutely key. We need to enable innovation. We need to combine the tools, finance, legal, diplomatic, technical, institutional. We need tailor-made solutions. We need to be adaptive, flexible. We need to embrace complexity. That's what we are in the middle of that. And it was always told, rightly, I'd say, by the special envoy on water of the Netherlands. He, during New York, he always said, embrace complexity. And he's so right. We need that. We need to enable innovation through individuals who want to be agents of change. We need to work cross-sectoral. We need to work multi-stakeholder level. We need convention. We need a convention and treaties and institutions. We need to build trust, ownership. We need to bust myth by facts. And we need to act locally and nationally and then also globally. And with these words, I would close these rich discussions. Take an opportunity, go and talk to your neighbors, to the panelists here, or get information to also contact Maysoon, who is not here, Laura from the Geneva Water Hub. This is also the place to get more inspiration. I hope you had some inspiration this morning, and I wish you a wonderful and inspirational rest of the conference. Thank you for being today with us. Goodbye.